What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to talk about some very critical levels to watch for on SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and many tickers out there. I'm going to break down what data is coming up for tomorrow that will affect the markets and also for Wednesday, as we have some very, very big stuff to be discussing. But before breaking anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, and it's in just about 9 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, looking at the market, we actually saw the market bounce off the zone we were talking about earlier. We were talking about the market seeing some buyers stepping in around this 442 area. But just as a reminder, okay, in case we do break below 442, if there's any like bad news or anything like that happens, our critical support, well, we have some support technically at this trend line, very close to 440, but that's not extremely strong. The real super strong support is going to be down at like 436. That's the critical support. So we could see this thing test 440, and if that breaks, then 436 if we end up breaking all the way down there over the next couple of days, over the next week. Those are some very important levels just to keep in the back of your mind. But what is my view of the market in a nutshell? Just to be honest with everyone, just to remind you all, I'm still a little bit more bearish for the months of September and part of October, as we have this cup and handle on the monthly on SPY. But for November slash December, this is going to likely lead to more upside, and we could see the market start to squeeze towards those all-time highs. Now, I know that may sound like crazy, but this is what the technicals are suggesting on the monthly. If you look at SPY, we're forming a cup and handle. We could drop for September and also part of October, of course. That is still on the table and still very probable to still see some downside for the medium term. But for like the more longer term, I wouldn't use the word longer term to describe like November and December, but you understand my point. For a little bit longer into the future, end of the year, we could still see a very monstrous rally. Now, let's not worry about the monstrous rally for the end of the year just yet. Let's now just focus for the month of September. And for September, there could likely be more downside as the market historically sees downside during the last 2 weeks. And looking at this trend, when we zoom out of SPY, we've been making lower highs and lower lows so far on this channel. And this is once again another sign that the bears are gaining an edge. Now, the real question is, are we going to rebound a little bit, or is it going to be like a bigger rebound before the market sees downside? Could there be more downside coming with the FOMC? Well, just as a reminder, for Tuesday, okay, we have just some housing data in the morning and not really anything else when it comes to data and etc. But for Wednesday, which is just 2 days from now, we have the FOMC meeting. We have Jerome Powell speaking, and that's when the rate hike decision is going to be coming out. There's a high probability that the Fed is going to just skip this rate hike again, but they may just continue to monitor CPI and PCE and all these other inflationary measures. And then they may be hinting towards one more rate hike at the very end of the year during the final FOMC meetings. They may give us one last rate hike for the year, and they may be hinting at this during this meeting. That could shock the market to some extent. But we'll have to wait and see what they end up saying. SPY also has this gap up here, so you never know how this could go down. But here's what I want everyone to know. As of right now, okay, we're just going to focus on the much shorter duration of time. SPY is starting to form an inverse head and shoulders and is trying to break some critical resistance. So we're going to be breaking this down on a much smaller level. Now, if this support holds, and if we are going to be on this uptrend, we want to see SPY just respect this trend line right here acting as its support. And if this is forming some kind of like flag or anything like that, there is potential for it to try to push up even higher into these higher levels just like this. So there's a possibility this is forming, and this could lead to more potential upside for the market just temporarily going into the FOMC meeting. But that would take us to this higher level close to these this 447 area. If we do try to continue to hold an inverse head and shoulders, there is a possibility of this playing out, but this could just be a flag forming for more downside as time goes on, because you could see the flag quite clearly, right? We could see something just like this, just hypothetically, right? Something like this could always form where we just see the market. Wait, hold on, I think my tool didn't work. Give me 1 second, guys. But the market could make another attempt to try to push higher before we do see anything like the downside. That's still very likely and very, very possible going into FOMC. So if we do try to rebound a little bit, with Jerome Powell speaking, I don't know if he's going to launch the market up or cause the market to just shift right back down to complete this formation. It's all very possible. But what do I think for like the really short term? just to be clear with everyone, we want to go to SPY's 30 minutes time frame, and we're going to be watching this resistance right here, this 50 EMA at 444.5. If we manage to break it, because we tried to break it, we failed so far. But if we try to break it tomorrow, there could be an attempt to try to get to 446. It is possible on SPY. I would not rule this out as a possibility. It's not looking that strong, so we're going to be watching to see if we test this. I'm thinking that we're either going to test this and trade sideways, or we actually break this, go a little bit higher, and then we start trading sideways. It's got to be one of those two. I'm in the middle. It's got to be one of them, but look for another retest, and we'll see which way it goes from there. Part of why I'm saying this is because Apple's stock, of all things, is starting to turn a little bit more bullish. You can see it had this nice accumulation, and it does have potential to try to go a little higher as this thing has a nice potential cup and handle forming on it. If you look at Apple, this could help the market push a little bit higher. But like I said before, guys, there's always the risk of downside after the FOMC meeting. But I just want to let you guys know that looking at Apple right here, Apple has a very, very nice looking accumulation structure that's developed on it. The reason why Apple ended up pushing despite the head and shoulders that formed on it is because we had some bullish news that came out. That's why Apple pushed up like this. Now, looking at Apple, this looks like it's not done pushing. It could have a little bit more upside towards this 180 area. So it may gap down a little bit and start pushing a little higher. If Apple gets this 180 zone, then we may be hit with lots of this chop and also sideways price action. So I think 180 is on the table for Apple. There could be a little bit more upside coming. And then this could help the market just a little bit, but I think it's just going to get stopped after the first couple of points. So I think 180 could be the target for Apple. It's a real possibility. For Nvidia, this is not looking that great compared to the market. It's not looking like super great. It's not looking too bad. There's a possible inverse head and shoulders forming, and we saw this thing come all the way down to 423. This is just very, very similar to this liquidity grab formation before big moves. So they dropped it one last time and pumped it right back up to buy down here. So the buyers are starting to step in again, and we have a potential inverse head and shoulders structure developing simultaneously. So there's a possibility that Nvidia is going to try to get above 442. If it manages to achieve that, I would not rule out the possibility of it getting close to 450 because 442 is going to be critical for it. You could see it got rejected off that zone today. We want to see Nvidia get above this. If Nvidia gets above 442, we can start seeing it push a little higher just temporarily. Okay, just because I'm saying the market may push higher doesn't mean I'm a perma bull. I'm simply stating that just temporarily approaching FOMC, the market could try to hold up a little bit. But then after FOMC, you never know what's going to happen with Powell. There's always the risk for downside. All right, that's all I'm saying. We could see a little bit more upside on Nvidia if this thing gets above 442. If it fails to do so, then it may just chop in this area just for longer, and it wouldn't really look too good. If it gets below 435, then there's going to be a risk of it coming all the way back down to 427, then potentially 425. But for now, we're going to be watching it attempt to try to get above 442. If it succeeds, that's going to be bullish, and I think there's a good chance of that potentially happening. We're going to talk about Tesla before the QQQ, by the way. Tesla stock is not looking that great from a technical standpoint for the bulls because Tesla had a bearish divergence that developed. I was talking about that in previous videos. And then when you look at it, Tesla has broken below some critical support. Tesla broke below the support at 270. And when we look at this chart, it's looking more bearish overall. It looks like this thing is making lower highs and lower lows. After some bad news came out because of Goldman Sachs downgrading Tesla, talking about their profitability not being the strongest. So watch for Tesla attempt to rebound, but we're going to be watching, does Tesla establish a lower high, which I think it most likely will. And then if Tesla ends up holding below the critical support, which I'm going to show you, that could be a bad sign. So here's what you're going to be watching for on Tesla. Go to your Tesla charts, and I think it's either the 30 minutes or the 4-hour time frame. I think it's the 4-hour. This is going to be super important. So on this time frame, watch the 50 EMA very carefully. This is what's holding Tesla right now, right here, this yellow line right here on the 4-hour time frame. Tesla could attempt to bounce a little bit. We're going to be watching and try to retest 268, 270, and it may reject off that to start cooling off. If the 50 EMA breaks, this is going to be a key level. If that breaks for Tesla, Tesla's going to come all the way down, in my opinion, towards 257. That's where our gap support happens to be. 257 is on the table for Tesla. If we break below the 50 EMA, the bearish cross on the PPO as it's looking weaker, so there's a risk of that potentially playing out. So watch this 50 EMA. We're going to bounce a little bit first, and we'll see if Tesla breaks this over the next day or two. If it breaks, it's going to turn bearish, and we're going to likely come to gap support at 257. And if 257 breaks for Tesla, it's going to fill this gap, in my opinion, and get very close to it's basically super close to 250. Not going to be good for the bulls. Okay, so I think the most likely move would be a rebound. It's going to try to rebound just a tiny bit. It's going to try to hold this, and it's going to fight to try to hold the 50 EMA. Then it might end up sinking either tomorrow or as soon as Wednesday below this, and start sinking towards this much lower level, towards 260, 257. There is a risk of more downside. I want to warn everyone in advance for Tesla. Finally, the last chart I'm going to talk about on TradingView is going to be the QQQ. This is also looking kind of in the middle. It's going to be dictated by Apple and also because of what we see from Tesla and etc. It bounced off this key support at this 368 zone. We were talking about this as well. We have a potential inverse head and shoulders developing, so there's a chance it's going to try to make its way back up to 372 and try to uptrend just a little bit, just like SPY. It's going to try to attempt to go a little bit higher, but the problem is it may not last. It may not push like that much higher. It could hit like 372 and just start trading sideways around there. And I think that's just going to be a small push up. I could see it pushing up just a little bit higher and then starting to trade sideways. Uh, the thing about that, though, is we're going to be watching to see how it reacts and what rejections we get. And then I think Jerome Powell is going to be the next big catalyst for Wednesday after that, when this thing starts chopping a little bit. So could Powell pump the markets? He could pump the markets temporarily, but it may not last forever. It could always, drop the next day or do something crazy like that. We'll talk more about Jerome Powell tomorrow. For now, we're just going to be focusing on the charts. Right now, I also want to focus on Microsoft. Not looking the strongest. We have a bearish cross in the PPO. But the thing is, it looks like it tried to base right here and it's forming a bullish divergence. So there's a chance Microsoft's going to try to retest 332 and it might just trade sideways after that. We have a bullish divergence and this thing is making an attempt to bounce. So I think it may try to bounce a little bit, hit 332, and we'll see if it rejects or not. If it rejects, it might just trade sideways or it might just like cool off just a teeny bit. But I think that there's a good chance of it trying to rebound just a bit. Looking at something else, we're going to look at the IWM. I think I skipped that. The IWM, Russell 2000 is looking more bearish on the 4-hour time frame, but there is technically a bullish divergence developing on it. So I could see it rebounding a tiny bit. It might just trade sideways because it's trying to base at this 182 zone. I think it might try to rebound a tiny bit, retest this 183 zone, trade sideways temporarily. It's a little bit weak compared to like the other indices out there, but the IWM may just trade sideways, and then we're going to be watching to see what happens after that. Relative to other ETFs, it's kind of weak. I'm seeing some sideways price action before this thing attempts to make a bigger move after Jerome Powell comes out. To add on to that, we have SoFi, which is looking kind of weak as well, continuing to downtrend. We have a bearish cross in the PPO. It actually closed below its 200 EMA. So we're going to be watching it backtest this 8.7 area. Could get to 8.8 and reject, and it looks more bearish. It looks like it's going to come down towards this 8.5 area very, very soon, and it may break below that to 8.22 if that fails. So it looks more bearish. Be very careful for all the SoFi investors out there, but this could be a very good dip buying opportunity. I'm a big bull on SoFi for the long term. Looking at something else such as AMD, this was very flat. It actually came down quite a bit, but now it's trying to rebound. We have a potential bullish divergence here. We're about to get a bullish cross in the PPO if this thing gets above this 104 area. My guts tells me it's going to retest 104 to 105, then trade sideways after that, but it's going to try to rebound a little bit. I think there's an attempt for that coming very, very soon. The VIX was up just a tiny bit, but overall, I just want to mention that we're still very, very close to the 4-hour 50 EMA, and we've gotten rejected off of this in the past. We're going to be watching to see if the VIX rejects off this or not. My gut is trying to tell me that this thing might start to cool off a little bit, just a tiny bit, as the market pumps a little bit, and then it may just trade sideways temporarily. But there could be more upside coming thanks to Jerome Powell. We could see the VIX eventually break out later on for the market to cool off. But the market may see a little bit of upside temporarily before more downside for the medium term for the later days in September after Powell. I think there's a possibility of that. Now, I also want to note that on the 30 minutes time frame, the VIX was not looking that great because right here, you could quite clearly see the VIX hit this resistance right here, very close to 15 before coming right back down. And there's a possible head and shoulders developing on it. If this thing starts cooling off a bit, it could mean the market has some upside coming just temporarily. And then we'll see what happens once the VIX hits supports. It could always bounce later on after Powell's speech. Now, on the dollar index, this came down a little bit, which is a decent sign for the markets. We're going to be watching 105. Could the dollar hold that? If it breaks below that, that would be bullish. If not, it is what it is, right? The market could still see downside. But as of right now, the dollar is looking weak, which could help the market pump. Coinbase is looking a little bit bearish. We might see this thing sink towards the 78 support. I'm sorry, 80 support before it tries to bounce. It may sink a little bit more tomorrow and try to bounce off 80. There's a real possibility of that. For Google, looking a little bit better than other stocks out there. We have potential bullish looking structure that is developed. We could see this thing fight for 140 tomorrow and still close very flat. It does look very flat. It hasn't really moved much over the last 3 days, so I think that's going to likely continue. Amazon's also looking kind of flat. It's not really doing too much, but it has a bullish divergence, so we might see Amazon test this 140 area very soon tomorrow. And then for Meta, we have a bullish wedge forming. We might see a breakout towards 305 if it gets above its 303.5 resistance at the 200 EMA. I think it's going to test this, and I think the odds favor from a technical standpoint. It's going to hit 305 to 307. It does look more bullish. It looks like Meta is going to try to accumulate. We have a nice structure on it, so there might be some upside coming for Meta in case people out there were not paying attention to it. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for listening. We're getting very close to Jerome Powell's big announcement about the rate hike and the changes to the Fed's policies. Make sure you're prepared. You're prepared for Wednesday. We have some big data coming. Get ready and do what you have to do, guys. I will see you guys all very, very soon. Thank you. Mark you to the moon because the long term is still very bright. And peace out.